Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight, calls for government to declare a climate emergency. Debris cleanup in Abaco to begin soon. Passengers on a flight get a message from a pretty special guest. Plus, who gave us our quote of the week?
Our News is brought to you by Alive.
Welcome to Our News, the weekend edition, and thanks for joining us. I'm Kyle Joaquim. Topping news tonight, calls for action for more to be done to address climate change and its effects here in the Bahamas. This time from the Cat Island Conservation Institute. 3 weeks after Dorian pummeled portions of Abaco and Grand Bahama, the group is calling on increased attention to be placed on the effects climate change has on small countries like the Bahamas.
We think that our country needs to take it at the next level and declare a climate emergency for our entire country at the highest level, from the Prime Minister and the House of Assembly.
Charles Hamilton, the Vice President of the Cat Island Conservation Institute, an organization spreading awareness on climate change and its effects, says it's time a climate emergency is declared for the Bahamas. Just last week, Environment Minister Ramal Ferreira said the Bahamas is facing a climate crisis, particularly after being hit by the Category 5 Hurricane Dorian. But Hamilton says the situation is critical.
When we look at the effects of Hurricane Dorian, we saw one of the strongest hurricanes to develop in the Atlantic basin. We can see the effects of climate change with new and emerging diseases. We've seen where mosquitoes, they're being able to survive for longer periods of time, and so you have to worry about things like chikungunya, things like dengue, Zika, things that we never really had to be concerned about because the period of time for the breeding season has expanded due to global warming.
On Friday, both Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis and Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley urged world leaders to take a stronger stance in addressing climate change and the negative effects it will continue to have on smaller nations in the Caribbean.
We absolutely need to be able to take the stance to say that, one, climate change is real, the global climate emergency is both local and global, and that the Bahamas has to be a key actor in the global stage to advocate on behalf of other small countries. And this is what CC Bahamas is all about.
Minnis and Mottley, while addressing the United Nations General Assembly on Friday, also called for more funding for sustainable development projects within the Caribbean. Hamilton explained why bigger nations have been hesitant in this regard.
We recognize that countries like the Bahamas are contributing the least to climate change. All small island developing states contribute less than 1% of greenhouse gases, which contribute towards climate change. While we're being told, okay, you guys are a bit too rich, so we can't give you the financing that's needed. This is absolutely wrong. Climate change is causing loss and damage today that needs to be picked up by global actors, these large global actors that are contributing to climate change, and future climate financing also needs to be invested in the Bahamas because we're not going to be able to afford to adapt against the future and current impacts of climate change.
So what exactly can the average Bahamian do, and where can they go to get more information?
The first thing is, if you go on our website, CC Bahamas, that's CICI Bahamas.org, you'll be able to access resources about the climate change declaration, the climate crisis declaration, what CC Bahamas is about, how you can be involved. And on our social media, we're creating infographics that you can share that talks about what is climate change, why is this important for the Bahamas, and what can Bahamians do. And one of the key things that we actually have launched is a petition for Bahamians to go on and support for our government to declare a national climate emergency.
Well, following the announcement by Environment Minister Ramal Ferreira that there is over 1.5 billion pounds of debris to be cleaned up on the island of Abaco following Hurricane Dorian, officials at that ministry have announced that 2 10-acre plots have been identified for debris collection.
Once Ministry of Works oversee the debris removal, we have identified 2 10-acre plots just outside of Marsh Harbor that would be laid down as a staging area for the debris once it gets to the, well, we're not going to be using the landfill that's in Abaco. We're going to use a special set down site, and it's now being cleared for the separation and isolation of various different components of the waste stream.
According to Wilson, the debris will be separated, compacted, and then separated again based on whether it can be recycled.
Stream, the waste stream is broken down into about 5 or 6 categories, and then they will be subzoned into various smaller categories. So we intend to, all the wood debris, well, when you say wood debris, the trees and stuff, we will be moving them to one section. They will be mulched. All the construction and demolition debris, which it includes all the plywood and 2x4s and some concrete and stuff, they will be also, the concrete will be crushed and used, probably given back to Ministry of Work for sub-base for the roads and probably foundations for persons' homes.
Wilson says a company will be brought in to handle metal disposal as well as refrigerators and air conditioning units that contain Freon. Now cars will be moved to a separate area so that the owners and insurance personnel can assess the damage. Then there's the situation with the cars, a lot of, we can't call them derelict vehicles, I kind of named them hurricane cars. They will be, we identified an area yesterday on about 4 miles out of, from the roundabout from the highway, that will be cleared, and those cars will be set aside and categorized as, I guess, small, big, whatever they are, so that the owners of those vehicles as well as the insurance adjusters can come in and assess the damage and to see the way forward on what they're going to be doing with those cars. Associate Professor of History at the University of the Bahamas, Dr. Christopher Curry, says he is discouraged by what he describes as vitriolic language directed towards persons, mainly Haitians and persons of Haitian descent, who endured Hurricane Dorian.
I think this will be like one of those moments where we say we will all remember where we were when Dorian happened, much like how Americans think about 9/11. They know exactly where they were, what they were doing, or an earlier generation with Pearl Harbor would have known where they were and what was happening when those events happened, or JFK's assassination. In our context, Bahamians will always remember where they were, what they were doing when Dorian hit. It's just one of those generational events in our country's history that are going to be imprinted in our minds and our psyche for centuries to come.
Days after the storm, Immigration Minister Ellsworth Johnson announced that there was no intention to grant provisional asylum to undocumented migrants affected by the storm. For Curry's part, he says the Bahamas and Haiti have a long history of helping each other that should continue.
As I'm sort of talking about 29 and 35, and we can surmise some things that are written down and some photographs we have of that. But the volume of information that we will have about Dorian, both video, archival documents, we have tons of pictures, photographs, video imaging, every kind of imaginable document is going to be there. And then you're going to have personal stories. People are writing down as we speak what they went through on a personal level. So you'll have diaries, you'll have official documents that you can use.
Well, following the devastation of Hurricane Dorian that saw several hurricane shelters in Abaco and Grand Bahama compromised during the storm, Bahamas Christian Council President Bishop Delson Fernando says it's time for better hurricane shelters to be built across the country.
Before this storm took place, I know there was conversation. I know sometimes you make it feel like nothing is being done. There was conversation about better bunkers, better shelters, but nothing happened.
Fernando says that's simply unacceptable with increasingly powerful storms taking aim at the Bahamas. Hurricane Dorian crawled over the northern Bahamas, pounding Grand Bahama and Abaco with winds over 185 miles per hour, torrential rains, and sea surges of up to 20 feet. It destroyed or severely damaged thousands of homes and buildings. Fernando pointed out the fact that some churches, which were used as shelters, were damaged during the storm, forcing residents, particularly in Abaco, to flee during the Category 5 hurricane.
We understand the importance of helping and a little bit in changing the climate, and we also realize that we are not the big polluters of the world, and we've got to really step up with some of our partnerships with the international community.
Fernando says building shelters will no doubt be a costly exercise.
And we'll need international funding to make those things happen. I just want to say that the idea behind those shelters is that year-long there'll be community centers. And so you could already feel the criticism the church get. All of the shelters were churches. All of the distribution centers are churches. And when those buildings are destroyed, we take no money from the state. It is the congregations that rebuild those places. And so we're in partnership right now talking about how the church can work with state.
A pretty cool announcement on board a flight headed for the Bahamas from New York yesterday. Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis taking to the mic to remind travelers to spread the word that despite damage done to Abaco and Grand Bahama by Hurricane Dorian, the Bahamas is still open for business.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I just spoke at the United Nations yesterday, and I told them that the best way they can assist the Bahamas in terms of our rebuilding, Nassau, our economic engine and touristic center, has not been affected. If they can get the message out that we're still functional, we're still open for business, and the more tourists visit our shores, it'll put us in a better position so that we can rebuild and get back to normal. So I want to thank you all personally for visiting the Bahamas. Thank you, and may God continue to bless you all. And I do hope that you have an excellent time in the Bahamas, so that you can tell your friends and relatives that the Bahamas is still open, the best place for tourist destination, and that they too should visit our shores. Thank you very much.
All right, still to come, could the Bahamas be more environmentally friendly? The details after this break.